Hello, sir. I welcome you to my podcast on my channel Learning with Chandan.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chandan, for inviting me. And I'm honored that a YouTuber like you have invited me for the podcast.
It,
And I wish that with this podcast, we can provide a good platform to your YouTube channel and even for the budding researchers that we can plan something better for them.
it's really an honor for me also, sir, to get time from you for this podcast. So,
Yeah.
sir, when I actually met you, when I met you from one of the courses that I used to do. When I saw your profile, I was actually stunned. It's like insane. When I saw that first you did your BCom, then your MTech, then your MPhil, then MCA, then even PhD. I was like, okay, how a person can do so much? So I would really like to know that how were you able to do so many things? What is the secret behind it?
Okay. So thank you, Chandan, for the question, first of all. So as you have seen that my profile is having BCom, MCA, MPhil, MTech, MBA, then PhD. Actually, I love learning. The most important thing is I believe in my first motto that is called knowledge for a better word. So I believe that while rather than to doing degrees, we should have the expenditure knowledge of various subjects of various diversifications. And I believe that when I started with my BCom, actually I was having my interest more into computers, but actually my mom and dad wants me to join the business. So, but I was not a businessman. I'm a son of a business guy, but I'm not interested into business. So after that, I was doing my computers from my childhood. So I shifted myself to MCA. Then I did my MPhil in computer science. Then I did my MTech in information technology. Even my MBA is into information systems.
Okay.
Okay. And even after that, I applied for 2, 3 universities for PhD, but due to the lack of the guides, sometimes the lack of other parameters that we are not getting proper collaboration from the university. So I decided to do for my PhD, but I struggled a lot in my PhD to get the admission. And finally,
Okay.
I cracked the test. I topped into that examination. I topped the interview. And after that, I got my PhD computer science. But journey of the PhD computer science is actually a challenging journey. So some people say it's a frustrating journey, but I believe that it's a challenging journey that
Mm-hmm.
actually gives you that you have to go for your abilities to the last extent. Like
Okay.
suppose if you are in military, you have to become a paramilitary commando. They actually check what is your, you can say, high end skills to get the tortures adjusted into your
Mm-hmm.
body, how much your
Mm-hmm.
agility is. So
Mm-hmm.
similarly, PhD is not a challenge for you, but if you go for like research in a proper direction, it becomes a journey for you. So PhD was like a challenging for me and even a journey for me because what I've learned was actually applied in my PhD. But yes, I was doing my hard work. I used to study a lot because for me, computers is everything. And
Mm-hmm.
even I used to sit with my students, do their projects with them. I learned from YouTube. I learned from
Mm-hmm.
books. I learned from everywhere. So I think that doing my degrees, it was not only
Mm-hmm.
the books that my teacher used to follow. So I
Mm-hmm.
can sit, so even have sitted with some students, some other teachers, other professors. I used to ask them their experience and other things. And I try to increase my knowledge one by one.
Okay, oh, that's great. That's great. And I even saw that you have recently got a distinguished scientist award. It is
Yes.
really a big thing. Really, it is great. So just tell us about it. That what is this award and how does a person actually qualifies for it?
Yo, actually, thank you so much, Chandan, for giving me your best wishes for the Distinguished Scientist Award. Yes, of course, in the age of 35, I got this Distinguished Scientist Award. And as you have seen my profile, I got many awards for my teaching and research. So I can say that awards have never mattered me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Awards are just being given to you because of your research as well as your good works. So Distinguished Scientist Award for getting I have recently published some of my patents in terms of IoT, speech processing, and
Mm-hmm.
even I have got some new terminologies in the area for underwater sensor communications. I even
Okay.
organized some good special issues in sustainability, cities and society. So
Mm-hmm.
considering my research work, I applied for this association very good and they were even stunned to see my profile. You will be
Oh.
surprised to know that even some of the people, they called me that, sir,
Mm-hmm.
this is one of the stunning profiles that we have seen. And this profile needs no introduction. So I told
Even
them
I
that,
was
okay,
standing.
So that profile needs no introduction. They told me, and after that they qualified me for Distinguished Scientist Award. And getting the Distinguished Scientist Award in the age of 35, like I've already got the Young Scientist, Best Scientist, and Distinguished Scientist. It is like a big blessing to my career, and it's like a highest peak that you can get in the terms of scientist activities. Because in my university also I'm having a scientist position. So getting a scientist position is always facing lots of challenges and hardships. So the only thing is that how much you are updated, how better connections you have, and above all, how you are actually harnessing your skills. You're going for good collaborations that people come together with you, and we can write, you can say, extensive good research papers and good projects also. That is what I believe.
So right now you are in Vietnam, right? And basically you belong to India. So I was just thinking that how was your journey from India to going there to Vietnam? Please tell us about your journey from India
That's
to Vietnam.
A good question, Mr. Chandan, because many people ask me this question. That's how you have reached Vietnam, how you have applied. So I would like to give you this answer that actually coming to Vietnam was like, it's called a miracle for me. Okay, it's like a simple, I can say that it was like a life-based opportunity. So basically, I used to have good contacts on Facebook, etc. And I used to send my papers on Facebook and even on LinkedIn. And one day I got one person, Mr. Dak Nohong Lee from Hai Phong University, he contacted me that, are you looking for some collaboration? And are you for some more research papers like this? So after that, I published 1 or 2 papers with him in good reputed journals. And after that, we even brought 2 books with him. That is, one is with Arduino and one is with the wireless sensor network. So after that, he asked me, are you interested to come to Vietnam? And are you interested to teach the students? So after that, he introduced me to one of the first professors, Mr. Nguyen Nguyen in Bhutan University. And he made the arrangement. And believe me that I got a straight appointment in very less period of time. And getting to Vietnam was like I can only say that because of my work and because of my skills, I only got this opportunity.
So one of the things that came to my mind when I saw that you are in Vietnam was like, how is life and research work different from India? So what we see in India and what we see in Vietnam, how are they same or how are they different?
Different. Okay, that's a good question, but I would like to give you a very bold answer. Actually, in India, what we are stressing is that the person is only having like rectification. That okay, you just have to read these things and you just have to write examinations, other things. But over here, the stress in Vietnam is more towards projects, is more towards practical orientations. And in India, most of the teachers are busy with the clerical work or admin work, like okay, make these files for NBA, make these files for NAC, make these that, which means that most of the work that we are doing in a day is like a useless work, I can say. Okay, so that work can be even done by some administration or some clerical people. Okay, but over here in Vietnam, our faculty is mostly busy with teaching and our research, and we collaborate with industry people. We regularly go to events, we collaborate. So that's the reason that over here in Vietnam, I'm getting more opportunities for better teaching, effective collaborations, and even more opportunities for doing research, writing, and other things. And even I'm also connected to many labs now, and even to many recognized professors, and even I'm getting strong papers from them, like from USA, Korea, Australia, Japan. So many people are more collaborating with me considering my research work. So you can say that if you come outside of India, you get better collaboration opportunities and better effective teaching experience.
So as you said that we get a better collaboration of opportunities. So last week I was talking to someone, and I asked him that that since now we are just new in our research, right? We may not have so many good contacts in the early stage. So how we can actually go to and talk to a person to ask them for collaboration? And that guy said that the best way to do this is to go into conferences where you will meet people and you can try to talk to them. So what is your point of view in this thing, and what way you can tell us to actually go and collaborate with others?
Chandan, I would like to give you a very straight answer for this, and it is
Yes.
going to be an eye-opening answer for all of you. That if you are looking for a collaboration, the person don't look you for like you are meeting the person, because I daily meet lots of persons on Facebook, LinkedIn, and many people like me that's we have seen your webinar or other things, but I don't collaborate with many people. So for collaboration, the most important thing is that what actually do you have in your hand? Like, okay, your profile, what is your profile, what you are working, what is the research works, what are the current publications, what are your books, what are your chapters, what effectiveness is there. Especially we also look towards like Google Scholar and what is the Scopus based publications. So if you have a good profile, you have good strong background, and you are doing some good projects also. So that's the reason that these are the primary role foundations, that even if I'm connected to you, why I'm connected, because you are doing your great work, I'm also doing effective work. So that is what we see in terms of collaboration and in terms of other things.
So what would be a first step to ask someone for collaboration? To go and send them by mail, or to meet them in the person, or what would be the first step?
The first step that I think as a researcher, that how I have grown my network, is the LinkedIn platform. And even there are some other people, some people say that, okay, sir, LinkedIn is another platform and Facebook is another. But I think that LinkedIn is a good platform, but there are some other research based platforms also, that you are following some people on their research, like ResearchGate. Okay, like we have saprofiles.com. So these three websites are my top targets. So I am a regular active towards ResearchGate, where I publish, where I put my all the papers over there, and even I also comment on the papers of other people, that what they are doing. And if I want to request a chapter, I always read their research. So once you are reading their research, once you're providing them feedback, the people will automatically contact you that, okay, sir, can you read this paper? So on the SCA profiles, even I share the papers. So with the keywords, people come to me that, sir, we are impressed with the work, so can we do for some extended work? So LinkedIn, when we publish our achievements, so many institutes contact you for some collaboration. So these three websites, like SCA profiles, ResearchGate, and LinkedIn, these are the three mediums in order to have some start of the collaboration. And then once the collaboration is okay, and you find that the person's work is okay, you can write an email to him, you can have a Skype call with him. So meeting the person face to face is not the foundation to have collaboration, but the meeting the person with a particular channel, with meeting a particular base of your research, that is the answer.
Okay. So as you said that you have so many ways by which you can tell to people about the work you are doing, about the things you have done, and all your papers. Amongst all of those ways, you also have your own YouTube channel. When I saw that, I was thinking that this guy has done so much in his life, and still he has a YouTube channel. So how did this thing came into your mind, and how were you able to manage your work and your channel along with all of them?
Okay, I would like to share you a small story that how actually I started my YouTube channel. One day I was teaching in my class in KCL Institute of Management and Technology. So I was teaching the lecture of operating system, and I was telling the students what are the different types of operating systems, why the operating system is better, and how it controls, what is meant by virtualization. I was doing the terminologies, and people were saying me, even the MCA students told me that, sir, we have studied operating system in our BCA, but today actually we came to know what is actually meant by multiprocessing, what is batch processing, what is virtualization. You cleared it. So after the lecture, one student came to my office that, sir, you are such a good teacher. Why don't you start your YouTube channel?
Yes.
I said, I've never thought of YouTube channel, but I don't know. So he told me, sir, please start the YouTube channel and start uploading the videos. So what I did, I just go back to my home at 5 o'clock, because my college was 5 o'clock. So what I did, after 30 minutes, I thought that why not to give it a shot? So I just go to a camera shop, and I just bought a Sennheiser mic, and I just purchased one debut video recording software worth 1800 rupees. And with just, you can say, in 2500 rupees, with just a mic and just a video screen recording software, I started my YouTube channel, and the channel only got 500 subscribers, but now I'm having 15,000 subscribers.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So
I saw that.
I keep on regular. So I'm adding all the webinars, but soon I'm not now regular in making the videos, but soon you can see that my more videos will be coming up in terms of security, in terms of data science, then career, websites, many, even Raspberry Pi, unboxings, Many things will be coming and hitting the channel after August 2020 because I will be free after.
Yes, sir. What I would like to see in your YouTube channel, if you actually plan to do, is some kind of more motivational stuff. You know, cause that just brings me to my next question, is that we as scholars, we as researchers, we come across things when we do not get what we actually wanted to get as an output from this work. So I'm sure these things would have come to you also. So how you used to handle those things, and how you used to pick yourself up and get back to work? How you used to do that?
Some people say that, sir, we are doing research, which means the result should be automatically 100%, but it is not 100%. 100% requires lots of patience, lots of hard work, and lots of dedicated skills. So that is what we can say, that PhD stands for patience, hard work, and dedication.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So as a researcher, I'm saying you that if you see Thomas Alva Edison, who invented the light bulb, and people asked him that, sir, you failed 2 lakh times and then you invented the bulb. And he said very smiling area that, sir, you said that I have got failed in 2 lakh times, but I know 2 lakh ways that how to not to the bulb.
Yes,
isn't it?
Yes, yes.
So that we can say that there are emotions that many people say that our paper got rejected. And I always say them, it is not got rejected. It means that the paper is not having the quality work, and it still requires more works to be done. So the person is not your enemy. The person is giving you a better chance that maybe if you improve that quality, you can make this paper into high citations. Okay, because let me tell you, publishing a research paper, it is only a half journey, but getting the citations to that paper so that the people read that paper, give you a better RG score, and even you are getting better H index and I index with the base of that paper, that's a different story. So make the paper not only to be publishable, but it should be citable also, so that community knows through you. And after that, you will get the emails via that paper that, sir, can you help us in this area? Sir, can you collaborate with this? Sir, can you extend this paper? We will provide you some platform in our special issues. So this is the journey that we have to see. So getting a rejection, or maybe the results are not expected, it is a part and parcel. So for that, you have to improve your hard work. You have to get more dedication. But the most important thing is, don't lose hope and don't lose patience, because research requires patience. Some things can even take 10 days, because when I'm doing some programming, sometimes the result even comes after 20 minutes. But sometimes the result doesn't come in front of us in 60 days. Okay. Happens. Sometimes we get paper acceptance in 55 days. My fastest paper acceptance is 32 days. Even I got my rejection after 1 year, even though the paper was very strong. So I didn't feel bad. Maybe I improved the paper, and after 6 months, I got the acceptance of that paper. So the thing is that the show must go on. The only thing is, don't stop, keep moving.
Wow, that's great. So so this brings me to the next thing, that when you think of a new paper, right, or when you plan for a new paper or new project, so what goes in your mind? What comes in your mind when you think of a new project or new paper? How you say that, okay, this is the work that I want to do, and how we should decide that, okay, which work to do and which not to do?
Okay. So actually, Mr. Chandan, I would like to say that this is one of the challenging aspect in one's career, that what is to be done and what is not to be done. So when you can say that if you talk of me, I will just talk of myself. So I keep a track on my research works, which means I got regular Google Scholar alerts. I regularly see the papers or the collaborating authors on ResearchGate, that what they are doing. So I should keep an eye on everything, that what is happening, because the most important thing to start a new project is be aware. Aware means that you are aware that what is happening. And second is be informed, because aware and informed are these two words that you should be there, and then you should start working that what is to be done. And when I start planning with my research paper and project, I always discuss with my core team that, okay, this person has done this work, this is the problem that is being solved, but let's see that can we take this paper to the next level. Some people say that you have to make the other people fool that your paper is better. But I believe in a philosophy that rather than you make other people fool, you should make the other people as a role model, that you are acting them as your motivating factor, that you have given, that he has given you a platform, that you are publishing the better research paper. So always feel that the other person who has published the paper before is your role model, and you are taking and extending his work. He is giving you the opportunity that you can extend my work. So have collaboration, have dedication, and keep on improving. So that is what I think in that.
Okay. So tell us about your very first research paper that you wrote. Means, so this might be like 5-10 years ago, like 15 years ago. I'm not sure about that.
9 years back.
9 years ago. 9 years ago. So tell us about it, like how that structure came कि हाँ अब लिखना है and यही लिखना. How was that?
Mr. Chandan, I would like to inform you that actually writing the research paper, frankly speaking, when I started writing the research paper, my first paper got published in the year 2011. It's about 9 years back.
Okay.
So I don't know much about that thing, because you know that when we start a career, how much we know about the teaching profession, what is the APA score. At that time, the APA score was very strong, and after that, in between UGC paper, UGC Net came, then Scopus papers, then conferences of Springer, then now SCA journals. So I have seen this industry, the teaching industry, to get mature and to get better and better. Okay, so I don't say that the quality education has improved, but the teaching milestones, I have seen it evolving. Okay. So I started my research paper like it was a conference in PCMSD College in Jalandhar, Punjab College. So there I published the first paper, and the first paper was just published in full proceedings of ISBN. Then I get my international conference, which was with the Guru Nanak Dev Engineering College in Ludhiana. And after that, I have never seen back. So that was the first two papers that I've seen. And you will be stunned to know that my first two papers were published on the same day, which means on the same day, one conference was there in Jalandhar, and in the afternoon, I attended another conference in Ludhiana.
Wow.
So I published two papers on one day. So I can say that it was not my first paper. My first two papers were my first papers. Wow. But before that, I would like to aware one thing, that my 18 papers, before those two papers were accepted, my 18 papers were rejected.
Oh, okay.
Yes. It was rejected in different conferences, different colleges, even abstracts were rejected because at that time, I don't know. But after that, one of my faculty member in that is Kamla Lotia College, he told me that before you start writing the paper, read the papers first. So I read more than 50 papers. Then after that, I got my two papers, and immediately after that, I got my first IEEE Explore conference. Then I got my ACM Explore conference, and within, I can say, after publishing my 4 or 5 papers, I got my first Scopus paper in 2013. So the things changed, but the thing is that I keep on learning, I keep on moving.
So talking about your first paper, and now after you have written so many of the papers, what is that one element that has changed, and what is that one element that has been same since your first paper and your now one papers? Like, there would be something that might have changed also, and there would have been also a thing that has still been the same since the first and the now one. So that's what I really like to know.
Yeah, that is a good question. Actually, as a researcher, I always say them that the pattern to publish the research, pattern to write the research paper, they actually change with the passage of time. At one time, you can see that in conference papers, we have to add the literature view, and sometimes the proposed methodology gets weakened, which means we don't know what is actually being proposed. But nowadays in conference, I always tell my students, after introduction, come to your work only, so that it is better to have that, and the people can came to understand that, okay, we are going towards the contributions only. So you can say that when I started writing the research papers, I was a very inexperienced guy, and I just, you can say, was used to write only the review-based research papers. But after that, one day I came to know that, okay, we have to add some results, we have to add some better proposed methodology. So the things keep on changing, but now I only focus more on my case studies and even on the result-oriented paper, where I am actually proposing the thing. Then I'm comparing not only with the standardized people, I'm comparing with the new proposed methodology. Suppose if I'm proposing a protocol on sensor communications, so my focus is not to compare that protocol with standard protocols, but to compare it with the other proposed protocols so that I can understand that whether my protocol is enhanced as compared to existing works, because those works are outdated. But if I'm comparing with recent works, I can defend myself that my work is getting better and I'm doing better as compared to the existing researches. My approaches are getting better and better. That's why I always say knowledge for a better world.
Wow, that's great. That's great. So here this thing comes in your mind, like in my mind, that when we send a paper, when we send a paper, like you have written a paper right now, and for you it is the updated one from all those works that you have done.
Yes.
But it will come online after 1.5 years or 2 years since the time you have sent. And by the time it will come online, that work might not be so new. In that gap, might so many new works have come. So by the time, so now you have written a paper which is very, very new according to you. And by the time it will come online, in that gap, many new works will come. So how you look at that thing and how you feel for that thing?
Yeah, this is an important question, Mr. Chandan, and I would like to aware all of you that we can avoid this problem. Now, let me tell you the problem that you are facing to giving to me. It is actually the problem that is connected with the Scopus-based journals. So Scopus-based journals are very slow and they are having lots of backlogs. I'm saying openly because even if you ask me, I can take some of the names of the journals, and those journals are actually even have not sent us the proofreading of the paper even after our paper got accepted in last September. So you can say that these journals are very slow, but actually this is a problem that is only connected with Scopus journals. But once you are in SCI journals, that's why we always say if you're doing new research, you please follow the SCI journals, because once the paper get accepted, the paper immediately comes online as an early access paper. And after that you can even download, but the only thing is volume and issue number is missing. So there is no problem at all. So which means that if you're publishing with ISI papers, there is no problem in terms of the paper getting late or other things. But in terms of Scopus journals, where the early access is not there, or when the full paper is not available, naturally you are getting some backlogs in that. That's why you can see that in the last 2 years, I have published very less papers in Scopus journals. Very less, or almost those papers that are actually there are almost on the final stage to get through. Yes, I agree with you that if you publish if you submit a paper and the paper comes late, so that is actually a disturbance to my career and disturbance to my citations and even disturbance to my ResearchGate followers. That's what I'm doing. So for that, to avoid the mistake, we always give the papers to preferably to ISI journals, like SCA journals. Because nowadays, if you see the journal suggester, you can find lots of papers in which journals even, you can find that the first decision is coming between 46 to 58 days. So 56 to 58 days, which means they are tolerable. And after we submit the revision, which means after 3 months, the paper is actually online. But only thing is missing is volume and issue number. So that can be done, no problem. But I put that paper already on ResearchGate and even on SCA profiles and even under the private text, so that I should not have any copyright infringement for that. And if the person wants me, I give him a personal copy, which means citations are increasing. Even you can see my Google Scholar, my 5 papers are under the early access by top journals in SCA journals, and still they're getting 3, 3, 4, 4 citations. But in the terms of Scopus journals, actually that is called a main beating towards your citation. So that's why we avoid Scopus journals.
So I would like to know what has that one element which has been constant since you have been writing your paper?
Consistency means that I should, the main thing is that I should keep my research simple. I should keep the research in a proper flow, in a proper structure. And above all, I always take a consultancy. I take 2 consultancies towards my paper. One is with a professional English editor. I always use that because English is a language that actually nobody can master. So I have some team members so that he or she can check my English, and he or she can give me such suggestions, and even she can even improve my grammar. So there is no need to have anything that, okay, you are a professor or other thing, you are taking help from an English editor. I believe that I am giving something to the return to the community. So it should be in a perfect sense. So how it is, it doesn't matter. And secondly, I always take an opinion with some of the experts because I have a strong community on LinkedIn and Facebook. I always send them the paper that this is the methodology, this is the idea, and there is always a confidence and honesty among us that the paper will not be leaked, like all that. So I take an opinion that how the paper is written, what is the flow, what is the structure, and the community always welcome me, because even I get the papers on cloud computing and sensors that, sir, can you check this? Even I send the paper to the blockchain people, AI people, neural network people, and they give me the answer that, okay, can you add this? Can you delete this? Update this section? So which means that I'm getting the two opinions. One is with English editor, one is with the technical person. Naturally, my paper is actually, even though you can say it can come towards major or minor revisions, but I'm actually reducing the chances to even almost more than 90% that the paper will never be rejected. So that's the answer. We have to go towards revisions, focus more on revisions rather than to have you can say a blind game for rejection. Okay, so once your paper is so much strong that you can remove rejection from your career, naturally you can go for revisions and you can update the paper.
So it's always advisable to send your manuscript to some persons like this, like before you actually send it to a journal.
Yeah, it is advisable. Because why? Because if you have a strong community, you have strong connections, then everybody is a friend of yours and everybody will care for you and everybody will give you the. Like sometimes I even talk to some of my Taiwan professors, Hong Kong professors, Singapore, USA. They always give me the opinion, second opinion, that sir, please add this. This paper can be improved with this literature. Add this literature. Add this reference. Improve this algorithm. So which means that once I'm getting the more elaborations, I'm getting my paper improved. Which means those suggestions will be incorporated as such in the paper, and you are getting towards paper perfections. That okay, these are the papers, and after that you get low comments, then reduce comments. Finally, you already become expert. So which means that day one, nobody is expert. You have to go towards collaborations. You have to take the second opinions. You have to enhance your skills. You have to improve your readability as well as your communication skills in the paper. And then you can have back-to-back SCA papers.
Wow.
So it is not an easy game. It is a game for at least 3 to 4 years that you have to play. Once you can get above, you can say good citations, good impact, and even you can get an opportunity that you can organize a special issue.
Wow.
So it comes with experience.
I understand. So since you have written so many papers till now, please tell us about your best paper that you have written till now.
Yes. Actually, if you talk of best papers, there are many best papers, but I would like to specify one paper, which is Advancing Modern Healthcare with Nanotechnology, Nanobiosensors, and Internet of Nano Things, Taxonomies, Applications, Architecture, and Challenges. Mr. Chandan, this paper is in the regular issue of IEEE Access with the impact factor of more than 4 now. And you can see that this is one of the biggest papers that has been written. And even I'm also proud on one of the paper that is a Smart IoT 1.0, in which I designed, me and my team have designed the world's first underwater IoT based communication system. So these are the 2 papers that I'm proud of. I'm very proud of.
So what is that special in these that you feel that these are your best?
The knowledge, the latest convergence, the latest coverage skills, and above all, we are proposing something novel which no person has done at the first time. So you can say that when I started reading the paper on underwater things, I just observed that there was only one review paper on Internet of Underwater Things, only one paper. And that paper was not giving any prototype or any architecture. So I decided that why not we can make a hardware that can be Internet of Underwater hardware. So that's why I decided not even to take that paper, but to take the concept that, okay, underwater things can be applied with IoT and we can make our ready-made prototype. So that was the first prototype in the world that I designed actually.
Wow, that's good. So coming back to your personal life, let's just suppose you meet your younger self, like 10 years younger self. So what message will you like to give to your younger self?
This is most important, Mr. Chandan, that the younger generation of ourselves today, they always say one problem, that nobody is guiding us. Okay. And I always say them that if nobody is guiding us, then what you are doing for that? Are you guiding yourself? Be your first mentor. So even in the PhD, many people ask me, sir, guide is not guiding. And I always tell them, guide is already having the PhD. You want to have your PhD, so be your first guide and then talk to the guide as like a consultant, that he's just a technical expert and just to audit your work. Don't depend on him. So the first thing, the message should be one thing, that don't depend on anybody. Start your own knowledge, start your own research, because today knowledge is everywhere. You have to be connected on social media. You have to talk to the people. And if your email and if your presentation is very good, everybody will try to guide you. Okay,
Okay.
and be very much informed and aware what is happening, and be the most important is be clear with your vision, that
Mhm.
okay, this is the work I want to do, this is what I'm good at, these are the skills that I want to improve. And most important message is, don't think that once you are into teaching line, or you've done
Mhm.
your you can say MTech or PhD, even you are gone. Please consider that you're always a student. Even today, I work like simple student. I don't consider myself as a PhD. I consider that I'm a student and I want to enhance myself. But since I will say one thing, that okay, I've done my PhD, I know the edge of computer science, then on that day I will be finished. So keep
Mhm.
on learning. This is most important for you to understand, that keep on sharpening your skills. Because if you talk of 7 years back, there was no job like of data science or cloud
Mhm.
computing. But
Yes.
these days you can see the jobs are improving. Maybe after 3 years, the jobs of today will not be the jobs of tomorrow, because in the
Yes, for
future
sure.
we see the jobs like automation, industry 4.0, cyber physical systems, digital twinning, augmented reality. We see
Mm.
smart grids. So these are the technologies that is going to make the things in the world magical. Okay,
Mhm.
so in
Mhm.
order to become the part of this magical technologies, you have to empower yourself, that okay, I'm actually mentally ready and I'm flexible and robust enough, and I can scale my skills anytime, and I can
Mhm.
enhance everything. So that is what I want to give the message, that you have to enhance your skills every day. Even today, I'm saying, Mr. Chandan, that even I'm enrolled to more than 10 courses right now in Coursera. Even if I find that even you can see that some of the FDPs or webinars that are coming on my email ID regularly, I always check the content. I don't see the professor. First of all, I see the content, and then I check that who is the person who is going to deliver, what is his experience, what practical things he has done, and then I
Mhm.
immediately enroll the course,
So
because
this
I have to value my time like other things
Hmm.
like that.
So this is what actually comes in my mind too. Whenever I see a course, I see what is the what is the
Content, yeah.
contents of the course, what they are actually going to talk about. But this is a notion in our country that only if a course is being organized by some big institute, only then
Mhm.
they will sign up for it. So is
Yeah.
this actually, or should we just stay
No,
on the
no,
contents
no,
only,
no, no,
not
no,
on
no,
the
no.
names?
No, no, no. First of all, the most important thing, if you are going to enroll in the course, is that I always believe, because I would like to twist this question. First of all, that
Yes.
some people ask me, sir, how we should choose the guide. So I always tell them that if you really want to choose your guide, first of all, choose that guide which belongs to your specialization. Like suppose if I'm
Yes.
into sensor communications, my guide should be into ad hoc networks or into sensor. He should know that
Yes.
field. Only then
Yes.
he can guide me, okay, where are the publications, what are the problems, and he can work with you. But if you're
Yes.
going with the non-specialization, he will never work with you. So
Okay.
similarly, I believe that if you are going to enroll in some of the course, first of all, check the content of the course. Okay,
Yes. Yes.
check the timing of the course. You should be free for that. You should be mentally ready for that. You should have the a particular time in order to revise that course. Then check the trainer, and then check his experience, that what is the work that is actually done by that trainer in the particular area. Then you should
Hmm.
enroll the course. Okay, this is the fit course, and that is where I should invest my time,
So
because
talking
time
of,
is everything.
so talking about online courses like we do on the Coursera and the ADX and Udemy, how useful do you think these courses are for us?
Actually, if you talk that these courses will give you complete knowledge, you are mistaken. These courses are acting like a simple foundation course and a start to your journey, that you
Hmm.
actually know, and you can do your research, you can find the timing.
Hmm.
So even I have even downloaded lots of tutorials from various torrent websites, and I used
Hmm.
to read the videos. And let me tell you, I have Python, machine learning, deep learning, and even like languages like Ruby on Rails. I can program almost in every language. I have learned these languages only from tutorials and from YouTubers, like from various channels like Eureka, Great Running. I always follow them. So the most important thing is that YouTube today is one of the best platform, because
Hmm.
gone were the days people have a problem, they just have to search the websites. But today
Hmm.
I go more on YouTube based search. So your
Hmm.
video based search and video based scrolling is improving, and even the content based and MOOC based courses, they are improving. So I believe that these things should be inculcated in the curriculum also.
So, but doesn't a faculty will feel bad since you have also been acting as a faculty? So,
Hmm.
from a faculty point of view, if your
Hmm.
student comes and tells you that he has been learning the same thing from an
Hmm.
online course, the things that you have been teaching him in the class. So will not that person feel a little bit bad or in failure in this case that his student is going for an online course instead of just following what he's teaching?
That's a good question, but I would like to tell you the answer from the core of my heart. Okay.
Yes.
And I always speak perfectly. Let me tell you, whenever I teach in the class, I always give at the last presentation that is called additional resources that you have to follow. And I always motivate my students that, okay, please come to my office. You can take these video tutorials. You can learn from these YouTube videos, because my only motive is that my student should have the caliber and the skills that he should be placeable. Consider the date of India today, 80% of the engineers are unplaceable. Why they're unplaceable? Because they're only dependent on the class. So if they're only dependent on class, let me tell you, actually, in the real time, let me tell you, they don't have to come to me that, sir, I'm not getting the job. They have to answer themselves as, sir, I want to get a job and I got the job because of my skills. So they don't have to depend on one teacher. The only thing is that your student is becoming placeable. The student is getting a good position. So for that, you should be acting as a guide to the class. And after that, you should be mentoring him in order to foster his skills, in order to enhance his knowledge. So enhancing with YouTube, I would be very happy with that students that actually come and say, we have seen this YouTube video, even we have learned these commands, which means that I'm getting a good team in which I can depend on that if there is a hackathon, rather than I can that student who is just practicing only simple things. Those students who are actually learning many things, they are actually improving their enhancements, and these students are valuable for me.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, that is the answer, Mr. Chandan. So don't think, let me tell you, suppose even you are doing your PhD. So can you think that if you have even done your coursework, that is enough for you to get a published of an ICA paper? No, you have to improve. You have to learn from that papers. So teacher is just a guiding force. At the class, I'm just a guiding force. But after the lecture is over, I am the mentor force, which means I have to make them learn add-on resources. Suppose if I'm giving them experience at what is today a data center, okay, I can explain the architecture, what is the technologies, how it is working. But after them, I tell them, this is your homework. Now, please go there and watch these YouTube videos of Facebook, Yahoo, Google, and Microsoft, what these data centers are. Now you have to give me a question answer tomorrow that what is the difference between the technologies are there and what Google and Microsoft are planning for the near future with their data centers. So which means in the class, they have the foundation with these YouTube and other tutorials. They have their enhancement towards their fostering skills that is actually required to become ready for the market.
So this brings us to the end of this podcast. I'm really thankful that you gave us time and told us so many nice things that I'm sure would be useful to many of our listeners. With this, I would like to tell everyone that if you have any query, you can just paste it in the comment box, and I will then ask sir to answer those queries also. Yeah, we may even ask him to come for a podcast one more time. Yes, sir. So I'm really thankful to you. Yes. Okay,
I'm also thankful to you that you have given me a platform into your YouTube channel, that I could be the right person for your subscribers for that. So here is, I'm on Dr. Anand here with Mr. Chandan. So do subscribe to his channel.
Yes.